What is up, you guys? For today's terrarium build, we're going to be using a few varied things. One of which is an old dead bonsai tree, an old fish bowl. So let's get started. So basically I'm adding my drainage layer and then my layer of fly screen and my coconut fiber on top of the fly screen, which I will pat down relatively firm to create a nice seal so the other layers of sand I put in don't fall through into the fly screen. What I'm trying to replicate here is basically kind of like a park. So like a pathway with a tree and grass sort of fields, I guess, like you've seen a lot of typical parks. Yeah, so I kind of like to take a snapshot of scenery and shrink it down and put it into a terrarium. So next I'm pretty much just smoothing my sand out with my paintbrush just to make it nice and even, or as even as I can get it, because the sand is there to be more or less an aesthetic thing. And I usually like to add at least 2 or 3 layers of different colored sand. You want to keep your glass clean as you're doing this so you don't get sand stuck to your glass and it ends up being in the next layer of sand, which is a different color, and it just won't look as nice if that happens. So it's good to just keep your glass nice and clean as you go along. So what I'm adding in the center of my terrarium is activated carbon. I do advise using carbon if you can get it. Pretty much it helps to keep the water really clean, because what carbon does, it absorbs toxins and impurities out of water. So it stops your water from going kind of stale. So I'm going to be adding one more layer of cocoa fiber, patting it down nice and firm, and again cleaning the glass as I go along. Then I add my little tree, which I've kind of pre-stuck some moss to. I actually did film the whole process of me doing that, but unfortunately I've somehow managed to lose the footage, so sorry about that, my bad. I did actually have that on film, but it's gone and I don't know where it is. But anyways, so I've attached moss to the tree, stuck the tree in the soil, and I'm just putting a little rock in as well, just because it looks kind of nice, to be honest, with that rock there. And I'm also adding a rabbit's foot fern. So next I'm going to be starting the pathway through my little park. So I'm again using the fine white sand to just layer it out, and that's going to be my gravel path, so you'd say. So one other thing I'll quickly mention too, guys, is those layers of sand I usually do in my terrariums. I usually do like to use more than one layer. I've only used one layer of sand in this one. But you'll notice if you've watched a couple of my previous terrarium builds, I've used multiple layers of sand. Now, on top of that being kind of very pretty and making the bottom half of the terrarium look a bit nicer, it does kind of serve a purpose as well. Because one thing these little terrariums are very prone to is fungus gnat infestation. And fungus gnats are basically a very tiny fly that can kind of overpopulate and take over your terrarium if it's overwatered especially. They love moisture, because the fungus gnat's larva, which is a type of maggot, lives in the soil, but it needs moisture to thrive. So if you're overwatering your terrarium, you risk fungus gnats. So what I've found is with the sand, it helps keep them away because they can't really reproduce in the sand as easily as soil. Sand has got no nutrients in it. It's so dense that they can't really bury themselves in it when they're a larva like they can in soil. So they just can't really live in it. So I actually prefer to have multiple layers of sand between the layers of soil. So even if I do get a few fungus gnats, because most terrariums do get at least a couple here and there, they're not going to overtake it to the point where you have to completely pack the terrarium down and start it again. So back to what we were doing. Sorry I talked a bit long on that one, but it is kind of semi-important, I think, with these terrariums to be aware of that, because it's very common. So I'm pretty much just adding my moss now. Now this moss I'm using is called pillow moss. There's lots of different types of pillow moss. Pillow moss seems to do quite well in higher lighting conditions if you can provide it with that. You can keep it in just like medium indirect light or bright indirect light. It does okay, like it'll live fine, but it'll go semi-dormant and it won't really grow much. If you put an LED light over your little terrarium, it will grow much faster. and it'll actually be a lighter green too. It'll look much nicer under bright light because it actually goes a very bright green, where in darker conditions the moss itself goes a darker green color and just doesn't look as vibrant. So if you did want to put a bulb over your terrarium, you can either use just a normal light bulb, make sure it's a cool white bulb, not a warm white. I've found the warm white bulbs just make the whole terrarium look kind of orangey and not that nice. Use a cool white bulb. They seem to have a slightly higher spectrum too, which aids in like growing of your plants and mosses. I'm using LEDs. So the LEDs I'm using, I can actually change the settings on them a little bit, but anything from 55K to 75K spectrum will grow this moss really well, and it'll be really bright and vibrantly green. So one other thing that you probably notice while I'm doing this is because I have to cut each piece of moss to a size and kind of almost jigsaw puzzle style put it together, you do kind of notice these seams between each individual piece of moss I'm putting in. This is only a temporary thing. It's kind of unavoidable when you're cutting this moss up because it's such a short, compact, dense moss. You do see where you've cut, and you do kind of see the seams between the two pieces. Over time this goes away. Like I said, if you've got a nice bright light on this terrarium, it'll grow a bit quicker, and those seams will cover up within a few weeks to a few months, depending on how well your terrarium's growing. So when it comes to maintaining these, other than giving them decent lighting if you can, like I said, if they just get indirect light from a window, not direct sun though, because they get too hot and die, but just indirect light's fine. They'll just go a bit more dormant, but they'll still live fine. Other than the lighting side of things, the only other maintenance you really got to do on these is maybe every few months give it a slight watering with a mister. You just give it a little spray with some preferably rainwater or reverse osmosis RODI water, as moss can't really handle minerals that well, so that water just seems to do better for it. Pretty much if you've got any condensation developing on the glass of your terrarium or on the lid, you don't need to water it. Only when you get absolutely zero condensation, you give it a spray, and only a very light spray, not much at all. Because basically water just recycles through this terrarium. It condensates, falls down, and recycles through the system again, so you don't need to water it that often, provided you keep the lid on. But anyways guys, that's all for me. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. Instagram is in the description if you would like to follow me there as well. Don't forget to smash the notification bell so you know when I upload new videos. But until then, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.